We're going to get started. I want to thank everyone for coming and attending today's actually our first in-person First Friday, I think in probably over 2 years. So we're very happy to welcome everyone back for the in-person event here today. And when we thought about, for the first initial in-person event, who to have as our featured guest, we all agreed there was, it was really a no-brainer to have County Executive Rich Fitzgerald with us for this event, because he has been so tremendous in working with the business community and the civic community throughout the pandemic, making sure that we have the information to navigate all of the ups and downs that were presented. And Rich has been one of the true leaders in encouraging revitalization of downtown Pittsburgh post-pandemic. So we thought there was no more important and no more timely person to have with us than Rich here for our first in-person First Friday event. I do want to thank our sponsor, BNY Mellon, who without BNY Mellon, we would not be able to do this event. They are our First Friday sponsor for the entire 2022 series. And we really appreciate, as we do with all of our sponsors, their investment in our work, their partnership. And as I said, we would not be able to do events like this without sponsorship, tremendous sponsors like BNY Mellon. So I do want to thank BNY Mellon and their tremendous chamber board member, Andrea Stanford, who couldn't be with us today, but has been a real leader on the chamber board in helping us and partnering with us on public policy issues as we move forward. So before I welcome the county executive, I am going to bring up our VP of Government Affairs, Jennifer Beer, who's going to lead the discussion with Rich today. So welcome, Jen.
Jennifer, that's very cool. Thank you, Matt. I'm very pleased to be the one to be able to welcome our guests today. I think everybody probably does know our Allegheny County Executive, Rich Fitzgerald. And as Matt said, I don't think, anybody here, everyone knows that he has been such a friend to our chamber, to the conference, and to the region as a whole. Under his leadership, and I think I saw at least one of his team members here, very strong team. He has worked on everything and led on economic development initiatives, transportation and infrastructure projects. He's been a real leader on the dialogue around workforce development and the need for good, high-paying jobs and a diverse economy in our region. So we absolutely thank him for that. But as much as he's focused on Allegheny County, I think it's important to mention that he's also very regionally focused. He's a great collaborator. I'm actually going to steal from you a saying that I've heard you say many times, sort of about the secret sauce. He's always talked about the way that government, business, universities, nonprofits, labor can all come together to move our region forward. And I truly think that, this is a leader who does that, who practices what he preaches. So thank you for your work for the chamber, the conference, and for our region. I don't know that he needs much more of an introduction than that. So I will please welcome up County Executive Rich Fitzgerald.
Wow, with that introduction, I think I can't go any better than that. I'm just going to say thank you all, and I got to go. First of all, it's good to see everybody again. Before we were so rudely interrupted, as the saying goes, for the last 2 years. It's better than Zoom, I will tell you. It's good to see everybody again. And boy, things have changed over these last couple of years. But I think in many ways, the Pittsburgh region is still poised, as we were a couple of years ago, and we're still poised for tremendous opportunities and tremendous growth. And we've seen a lot of good things happen over these last couple of years, regardless of, obviously the pandemic. And let me just address the pandemic. I think one of the things that, Pittsburgh had become known for is our eds and meds, culture, the eds and meds ecosystem, which was a big part of how we revitalized even before, obviously, the pandemic. But when steel and heavy manufacturing went down 3 or 4 decades ago, it really was the eds and meds that bolstered us and certainly brought us through in a good way. The fact that we have almost 1 million people in Allegheny County vaccinated right now allows us to actually participate in these type of events and feel safe and feel confident that, you know, we can go back into gatherings, go back to work, doing the things that we do. Since we were together last time, the census came out about a year ago, and for the first time in 60 years, since the 1950s, the baby boom of the 1950s, Allegheny County grew in population again. It's a big deal. And how did we do it? Well, we didn't do it by birth rates over death rates, because we still, because of the demographics we have, our death rate is still exceeding our birth rate. We brought people in. And who did we bring in? We brought in the 25 to 34-year-old workforce. We actually grew by 20%, the 25 to 34-year-old age cohort, while the nation was growing at 11%, almost double the nation. So we're becoming much younger. And when you look at the who's coming in and who those folks are, we see the income level is higher than the median income. And again, I'm using a little perspective. I've been the county executive now in my 11th year. When I started 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, the median sale price in Allegheny County was $100,000. 11 years later, 10 years later, it's $250,000. So it's gone up 2.5 times. We've made a lot of people wealthy, which is good if they've been paying their mortgage. But more importantly, the average income has actually exceeded that, the average income for the Pittsburgher. So it's been more affordable for the average worker, but not for everybody. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have right now is equity and getting everybody included in some of the great things that are happening around robotics, around artificial intelligence, around life sciences, manufacturing, finance, eds and meds, kind of all the things that we've been good at. And the other thing that I think has really been beneficial, I will tell you, coming through this pandemic, has been our universities. They have been so proactive. Pitt, Duquesne, CMU, Robert Morris, Chatham, Carlo, Point Park, all of them coming together, LaRoche, in really making sure that those 100,000 students that we have here in Allegheny County, including CCAC, really were able to be safe and able to continue with their education and continue with the opportunities that they're able to do. We've got some big changes coming about. Big announcement that was made yesterday. Chancellor Gallagher is going to be stepping down. And I will tell you, Chancellor Gallagher, along with President Johannian, have been absolute dynamite when it comes to economic development, how they have been able to commercialize things on their campuses, the research and development that they do, as well as keeping it here and commercializing it as part of what we're doing. And you can see that certainly the robotics that we see down in the Strip District in Lawrenceville and what's happening in Bakery Square and in Garfield and in neighborhoods that previously had not been doing very well, but now are, you know, some of the hottest neighborhoods in the country. And again, those new people that are coming in, I want to talk about that a little bit. We've also become a more welcoming community. The changes in that demographic over that last 10 years, we've increased our Asian American population by 80%. Our Hispanic population has gone up by 80%, and our mixed race population has gone up by over 100%. So there's a diversity that's going on, not just in the industries that we have, and again, I mentioned, you know, a number of them, but also in the type of folks that are coming from around the country and around the world, and finding Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh region a really, really positive place. One of the challenges we also have is to spread out this diversity. Some of our surrounding counties, Jen was talking about, you know, all working together as a region. Not all of our surrounding counties have been able to benefit the way, you know, the urban core has really done around our innovation district. So we need to make sure that happens. Certainly there's going to be great opportunities when the Shell Cracker plant comes online later this year. We see a great opportunity for manufacturing in that quarter of the region where Washington County, Beaver County, and Allegheny County, and even Lawrence County kind of all come together. We've got some great opportunities that as the federal government is talking regarding the infrastructure law that passed last year, and they're talking about, you know, where to locate a hydrogen hub. And there's probably going to be 4 or 5 around the country that are going to be located, and we got to make sure we compete as a region. It probably won't be in Allegheny County. I'd be surprised if it is, but I could see places like Fayette, County, Greene County, Washington County, Beaver County certainly be in the mix for those type of things. So what do we see on the horizon? Well, you know it better than me, because as I talk to most of you and most of the business leaders and businesses in this community, what I hear again and again is we can't find enough workers. We cannot, we need to hire this many workers. We need to replace people. Some people don't want to come back. Some people did retire during the pandemic. And that training and that ability to hire more people is really going to be a core of what we do. And we see a lot of it across the board. It doesn't matter if it's in healthcare, certainly around nurses and respiratory therapists. We see it in our building trades. I hear that when I talk to whether it's the steam fitters or the electricians or the carpenters or the laborers, iron workers, et cetera, all looking for people, because we're going to see a lot of continued construction and investment, in the coming years. We have a new mayor that I think is going to be very aggressive in trying to make sure that certain neighborhoods that haven't been invested in are going to be invested in. We saw coming together with the Oakland Crossings initiative that came about, where there's going to be some investment there. And again, that's one of the things we're hoping with the new infrastructure law that comes about, that we can finally improve the access to Bates Street, connecting our universities down onto Technology Drive and Hazelwood Green. The access and entrance points off of 376, off of the Parkway, needs to be one of the things that we really push in a good way. I want to also thank the partnership that we have here. Matt, thank you for the work you've continued to do. We've continued to have a lot of these conversations over the last couple of years through Zoom, through our social media teams, the other ways to do it. But again, it's a good way to be here. Also want to thank, I see former Secretary Davin. I like to say former Economic Development Director Davin, because that's what he was important to do. But one of the last things actually Dennis did before he went into the private sector was come with a $1.2 million grant, again, for a training facility for our sheet metal workers, for apprenticeship for our sheet metal workers. And we've seen those kind of investments over the years with our fitters, with our plumbers, with the various trades and various apprentice programs, bricklayers that we're able to have. So the partnership he has, and obviously I have Lance Chimka, who succeeded him, but also worked with him on the Governor's Action Team for a number of years, is also an important partnership. So Dennis being back here in Pittsburgh understands what we can do here locally, but he also obviously has that connection with state government and all the things that can do. Also good to see Mr. Turzai, former speaker, here today, also in the private sector. So a lot of changes going on. And by the way, in a year and a half, I'm going to be in the private sector too. So it's going to happen to all of us. But there are big changes. And one of those big changes I did want to mention today was Congressman Doyle. Congressman Doyle, I think in many ways we've taken for granted that over these last dozen years, his influence and his clout, I will say, in Washington has just brought so much and so many resources back to this region that's helped grow the robotics industry, that helps the NIH and CDC funding he's gotten from the University of Pittsburgh, the Tiger grants that we've gotten in East Liberty that help revitalize that community, and in Cary Furnace and the CAP and park that we've got in the 28 acres up in the Hill District area, connecting the lower hill to downtown Pittsburgh. What I want to tell all of you is you got about 8 months. So if you got a request, get it into Mike Doyle right now, because when Mike Doyle leaves, regardless of who replaces him, a lot of that clout and a lot of that influence is going to go away, and it's going to be lost. I also want to talk about the airport a little bit. That's always top of mind. We know that industry has been hurt as much as anybody over the last couple of years as travel certainly got curtailed. We're starting to see a comeback. It's probably about 80 to 85% back to the 2019 levels. We see Air Canada's redoing the flights to Montreal and to Toronto. British Airways is coming back, as we all know. We made that announcement early June. It's an amazing thing, number one, to get that flight. We worked very hard to get that, and Christina and her team really worked hard to do that. And then to get it again, because it really did get taken away because of the pandemic. And then we had to fight to get it back again. To win that twice is really a big thing. So we want to make sure people utilize that and people are doing that. But out at the airport, there's a lot more than just the flights that are going on. And by the way, the San Francisco flight is back as well. It started in March. So that connection I know is important to a lot of folks in this room But we're seeing a real big increase in cargo and logistics. And they've been very intentional, Christina and her team, going after that business. And we've really found that Pittsburgh really fits very well because, the big players in that game, particularly around international cargo, have been New York, have been LA, been Chicago. But when it really comes to cost and nimbleness, Pittsburgh has really been put on the map in that regard. It's one of the reasons Amazon started with a flight, one flight a week, and one flight a day, and then they doubled it. They just went to two. We've got flights with Qatar. We've got flights with India. We've got flights with China, with Helsinki, and places around the world. In addition to our folks at FedEx and UPS who've continued to increase the amount of work that they're doing. The warehouse and logistic business that's going on out there, they almost can't build the buildings fast enough for what we need to see. We also see, again, at the airport, and Dennis can probably remember this when he was economic development director, when we got people to build a building on our airport land, number one, they had to have a long-term lease, and number two, they had to have some tax incentives from a TIF or alert or something else that we would give them. That's no longer the case. AI Nair and some of these companies just want to build. They just want to build because they know, because of logistics, when the cracker plant comes online, those type of things happen. We're going to be in a really good place. We also have Neighborhood 91, and many of you have been part of that we've had out there, where companies like Wabtec are actually using 3D printing and additive manufacturing to make the type of parts that they need as one of the leaders in the worldwide rail industry. There's other companies in aerospace that are doing a lot of the same things. Again, we almost can't build it fast enough to get these companies in here. And again, it's been a great partnership with the state, who's helped us with some of the funding for the 3D printing and the additive manufacturing that we've had. That's really been very helpful for some of the things that we've done. The last thing I want to hit on, and then I want to open it up to any questions. Well, two things. I want to apologize, or I guess ask for your indulgence for the construction that's going on in Fifth Avenue and Forbes Avenue as you come through Uptown. That's the BRT. Finally, after all these years, it's under construction, and we're getting the utility work done, and the subsurface work that's being done. That's going to really be an absolute game changer for connecting downtown Pittsburgh and Oakland and everything that comes through Uptown. And that's going to certainly lead into some of the things that we're seeing with Duquesne University coming out with a DO school, with a medical school, the second medical school that we'll have in town. Again, adds to the life science ecosystem that we're continuing to build out here in southwestern Pennsylvania. That's going to continue to be one of the growth areas moving forward. But then I want to also talk, I mentioned it briefly, but I think equity and inclusion and how some communities have been left behind. Not all the folks and all the great statistics that we see around housing prices and jobs and income have gone to folks in some of our other communities. I see a community named Wilkinsburg, and I think you've probably seen that story. I care a lot about those folks in Wilkinsburg. I'm an East Ender from the city, but my neighbors that I grew up with, a lot of them were from Wilkinsburg, and I've watched that community in large part because of the tax millage is so high that they almost have no ability to get private investment from the residential part of things or the commercial part of things that happen. We see a lot of investment in the city of Pittsburgh right up to the line, right in Edgewood, in Swissville, in the city of Pittsburgh, the communities around there. And we really want to see Wilkinsburg, the folks of Wilkinsburg, benefit. And I think that's one of the things, moving forward, we hope that the city of Pittsburgh and them and the folks of Wilkinsburg are able to come together, and hopefully it'll be a referendum question in a year from now, and let the people decide. Let the people decide, what type of governance and what type of thing that they would like to see. I'd also want to thank Matt and Jen. Both of them serve on boards that are very important. Matt Smith serves on the Airport Authority Board, which is obviously a regional importance of what we do, not just in Allegheny County, and Jen Beer serves on the SPC. I want to thank her for her service on that. The SPC, for those of you who don't know, is the 10-county consortium that does a lot of the planning around transportation and infrastructure that we're going to be doing. We're actually be taking a trip up to Harrisburg this week Chuck Coley's going to be helping us out with that, meeting with some of our folks as we know that Act 89, which is be coming to an end, needs to be reauthorized, and all this federal money that's there needs to be matched by some state money and local money that we need to do. So all of us working together with my fellow county commissioners in the 10-county region, working with our friends in Harrisburg in a bipartisan way, are going to work together. So I want to thank Jen for all of that. And with that, let me open it up to any questions any of you guys might have.
Well, I was actually going to kick it off with a bit of that. We sort of touched on a little both parts of what I was going to kick off the question with, which is I think we've all seen, unfortunately, recently what a lack of investment in infrastructure can mean to the community with the Fernhola Bridge. But on the flip side, we've seen a lot of opportunity with the American Rescue Plan funds. You mentioned the federal infrastructure bill last year. Just this week, the transit dollars that we saw come in. Also recently, locks and dams being funded. So a lot of opportunity. Obviously, as an executive member of SPC, I know you're heading up to Harrisburg, you said, but just a little more, how can we, as even the business community in the region, work together to take advantage of, there's so many pieces out there to help sort of put these together and make sure we're, using it to the best of our ability.
That's a really good point, and I think it's a great segue into what we really do need to do, and it's really to communicate with all of our elected officials in those various counties, not just the county commissioners, the 3 county commissioners that serve in the other 9 counties, and obviously the mayor in my office to let us know what your needs are, but also those state representatives and state senators that represent those areas as well. They need to understand the importance of what that investment would mean. Obviously, Fern Hollow, that incident brought a lot of things to mind, but there are some things that didn't happen catastrophically that we're lucky didn't. And I'll look at one as the Montgomery Lock and Dam. The fact that was really at a point where it was really vulnerable and still might be until they get it fixed. But when you think about the Montgomery Lock and Dam, which is on the Ohio River in Beaver County, we've got a cracker plant that's ready to come online, and some of the manufacturing opportunities that are going to happen there. So the fact that, I want to thank Congressman Lamb and Senator Casey. I know that's something they've been pushing for a long, long time, but to get infrastructure work around our ports, around our bridges, and around, the transportation aspect we talked about. I know I talked about, inclusion around training and workforce development, but also transportation is going to be every bit as important. We got a $1.4 billion project going on at the airport. We got to get people out there. We got to get people to be able to get to those sites, and they got to get there safely. And transportation is just a huge part. I mean, the BRT is going to be a great thing, but we've got to make sure we do make the investments in the things that we need.
We're here and ready to help. Yes.
Rich, you've done a great job with the business climate. I'm just wondering what you see as the future key issues to, for instance, that big chip plant that they're building north of Columbus. I mean, what are the key issues and impediments to further improving our business climate around here?
I think it's really at this point marketing. I think we need to be out there selling all the great things that we have, and we do. I mean, when you think about the cities we compete with, not just the San Franciscos and the Bostons and the DCs, but the Indianapolises and the Nashvilles and the Cincinnatis, when it comes to talent and drawability and jobs that are here, we have it as much as anybody. And then you look at things like cost, the cost of housing, the cost of office space. We're as competitive as any place in the country. Quality of life. We have the quality of life that the big cities of New York and Boston and Philadelphia have, in large part because of the things that happened a century ago. The museums, the symphony, the sports teams, all those great things. All these new cool cities don't really have that, quite frankly, like we do. And then the welcomability. We've now become a much more diverse and much more welcoming community to attract that young talent that, quite frankly, has choices about where they want to live. And you've got good neighborhoods, you're closer to, the travel time, if you live in some of those cities is really a lot more than I know we complain about traffic, and that's the way what we do in Pittsburgh, but compared to some of the other cities, it's not nearly as bad. So I think we need to keep selling all of the great resources that we have. And oh, by the way, we got more natural gas than anybody in North America. So we've got that aspect that makes us competitive, and obviously particularly now in the world situation where energy, and we can see the price of gas going up again, not just gasoline, but I mean natural gas. So we see the producers that are now going back and doing the things they need to do.
Could I add one thing to that?
Yes.
I think all of those attributes are wonderful. We hear one thing from the business side that keeps us uncompetitive, and that's the state's corporate net income tax rate. So probably a lot of you have heard me talk about the high C&I rate. That keeps us off lists before anyone can find out all these great things that are happening here. So
And I think
getting that down would be another marketing tool that can then just help all those great things that you just listed.
and there does seem to be, I mean, the governor's come out with that in his budget address, and there seems to be bipartisan support, and hopefully through the budget process. I know it's something Secretary Davin's talked about in his former role. But yeah, if we could become competitive in that area, it puts us in a better spot.
Anybody else? Victor?
So a little bit of an extension of the question of kind of what's missing. You said marketing, getting the word out for everything that's going on here. You've rightfully said that there's so many initiatives going on from for-profits, nonprofits, educational institutions, governmental institutions. So when you look at all of those initiatives and you look at those cities that we compete against, is there something that's missing here? Is there something, we're $1.4 billion going into the airport, lots of infrastructure investment going on, lots of investment from various companies, but is there, whether it's an industry, a company, an initiative that you see in some other destinations or other counties that you think would be something that you would like to see here? Is there an element that's missing that you would like to see brought to our community?
I think it really is that continued marketing, the continued for us to brag about ourselves. Pittsburghers aren't really good at that. I mean, from your industry, we'd love to have an ocean, I guess, maybe, or
Bring cruise ships on the
beaches, I guess the beach on the Vaughn or the Ohio isn't the same. But, obviously tourism. I think that, look, Pittsburghers, we know this intrinsically. All the people that left 30 years ago, 40, 20 years ago, they still have a soft spot in our heart. We meet them all the time that come back or that want to come back. And there's something about this place that gets in your blood, and it never leaves you. That's why they're Steeler fans, and they wave those towels all over the place in the country. So I really think it's continued cooperation with our universities. I will say Pat and Farnham have been tremendous. I'm hoping the next chancellor, and I know he's got a whole year, he said he's going to for the search. But there's big changes. Our congressional leader is leaving. You got the chancellor's going to be there. There's a number of folks that are going to be changing, and hopefully they continue on some of the momentum that we have. The other thing, and I didn't hit on this, and I know it's probably top of mind for many of you, is how the workplace is changing. That's particularly in the downtown office complex. How many square feet of office space do the financial, the law firms, the engineering firms, et cetera, need? And how's that going to change the dynamic that we've all seen here in the urban core in downtown Pittsburgh? So that mix of housing and workplace, and are people coming back every day? They coming back 2 days a week? Are they not coming back at all and working remotely? I think all of us are trying to figure out how that's all going to work and how we can make that work in the new economy. Some of it's generational. I like coming to work every day. Some young people like to maybe stay home and do it on Zoom, and that's something we got to kind of figure out. Hybrid, yeah, exactly.
So what's the benefit of fractional government versus more collaborative? And one thing that comes to mind is for the Southern Beltway open, you've got a natural corridor from South Point through the Cracker, perhaps further north. And yet you've got 3 counties, a number of municipalities, and each one has different taxing things and stuff like that. So is there a way to start thinking outside, like other regions that have taxing authorities over a region? Is there a possibility for that? Or, do we stay in this where you have these little townships that you may have a building that's on 2 townships and each one has a different rule of what you're supposed to do.
That's a challenge. I don't know that we're going to change a lot of that. I was hoping to in my term, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. You bring up a really good point, and I'll tell you where that's going to affect us a little bit is around the automotive autonomous vehicle industry. We're worried, we as a community, we're growing like crazy, Argo AI, Locomation, Aurora. But if each township was allowed to set rules about how testing can occur, you know, going from Pittsburgh to Millville to Homestead to Dormont to Cranberry, we're going to lose out. They're going to pick up and go to states that don't have those kind of rules. So that's one of the things we're working on. I know I am, and others in Harrisburg are working on to try to make us competitive in those regards. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what we kind of need to do. So to have rules that are standard, whether it's around natural gas drilling, whether it's around other type of investments that occur, you know, we want to make sure that that happens. So it's something we talk about all the time. I know Stephanie and I talk about this as we try and figure out how to navigate a 10-county region. Organizations like RADC, which are located in many of these places and are trying to attract folks, are looking at that as well. So it's a challenge, and I'll leave it to our friends at the chamber and the conference to go up and talk to our friends in Harrisburg.
Yeah, that's one of our top priorities is to help with that legislation that you talked about. So, yeah, it's a big industry, $1.5 billion for the autonomous systems industry. And I'll make that plug later because that's our next First Friday. We'll talk about that later. Any other questions? Could I just real quick too, whenever you ask a question, please just identify yourself in case I don't know. Yes.
Always appreciate how the executive supporting our efforts. You just said Asian American population has gone up 80%.
Over the last 10 years, yeah.
So how can you use that to bring more businesses to the region?
Well, I think it sends a signal that, you know, Pittsburgh's open for business and we're welcoming for business. And certainly folks in the Asian American community, whether it be the Bhutanese, Indian, Chinese, et cetera, have been unbelievable entrepreneurial. You look at the entrepreneurial percentage of that population, it's higher than the general population. So starting businesses, doing the kind of the things that Pittsburgh's been known for decades is really important. And folks in that community who are welcoming to others who are across the pond and are looking to relocate, and that Pittsburgh's a great place to be and a great place to come. And I think you're going to see a lot of that also with this Ukrainian situation. We've got a long history of Ukrainian heritage here in southwestern Pennsylvania, going back to the coal mines and the steel mills, et cetera. And I think during, you know, this current crisis in Ukraine is going to help bring more of that population into. That's not the reason we want to have it happen, but it's good that we're here to provide that type of place refugees can locate to.
And would you lead us in bragging about the region?
Absolutely, I'm ready to. Well, let me just, one thing about the Indian American community that I've said this for years. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was really one of the only cultural groups that was coming to Pittsburgh. When everybody was leaving, the Indian community was coming to Pittsburgh. And I could never really figure out why. And then I kind of did figure out why, because for those of you that don't know, the temple along the Parkway East that you see coming in from towards Monroeville, it's in Monroeville and Penn Hills. Actually, I think it's in Penn Hills, but it's right on the border. Is kind of like the Vatican for the Hindu religion. It is such a centrally located and such an iconic place that during some of the weekends and some of the holidays, you will go there to a celebration and you will see license plates from literally every single state in America as people make pilgrimages to this temple. It was built there, and talking to some of the elders of the community, why was it built there? For a couple reasons. Number one, they wanted to replicate something in America that replicated the place in India where it was they have their temple, and they needed a place with hills, hey, we reached that, in a place with 3 rivers. So it had nothing to do with people that were attracting or the conference or government leaders saying, please build it here. It was our hills and our rivers. And it was built there, and they have, I think it is the largest congregation in North America. And on weekends in the spring and summer, literally fill up hotel after hotel after hotel in Monroeville and Penn Hills as people come and spend time there. And then when they come there, they kind of fall in love with Pittsburgh, and some of them stay and work here and have businesses here. So that's just one area in which, you know, we've been able to, you know, become multicultural in our growth. So. Yep.
Hi,
I'm
Eileen
sorry.
Anderson, Manufacturing Business Association. Nice to have you here today. I think a while ago, I may have heard you mention, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a need for legislation for Allegheny County to be able to collect taxes for transportation.
No, I think what I have said is, as the state has Act 89 expiring, the state legislature and the governor are going to have to come with new funding to do transit, roads, bridges, all the things around transportation. So the governor put together an East and a West study group a couple of years ago to figure out how should we fund it. Because transportation is it's a little controversial. Number one, we have in Pennsylvania the highest or one of the highest gas taxes in the country. So I don't know we can raise that anymore. We have one of the highest tolling. You know, if you get on the turnpike and you've gone to Harrisburg or Philadelphia or points on the turnpike, you realize how that tolling is pretty high. And then at the local level, we tax property very, very high for schools and municipal and county government. So those 3 taxes are very, very difficult. Now the question is, how do we fund transportation when Act 89 expires? So I think it's going to have to be a mix. And one of those mixes is probably going to be at the local level, meaning probably at the county level. And my wish would be to allow counties to have some flexibility that if they want to try to find a revenue source, that they can do what's best for their region. And that can be part of a local match to, you know, access more state funding that PennDOT will be able to collect, and possibly even federal funding with the, you know, the transportation and infrastructure bill that recently passed federally. So that was what I was saying, but I didn't advocate any individual revenue sources.
Right now, you don't have it. You just have to rely on the property tax area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank
you.
Paul Svoda, okay, like, as always, thanks very much for your conversation. You rattled off a list of folks who are going to be transitioning to the private sector. Or
You've had one of them, right? Yeah.
Right, and of course, we'll add Governor Wolf to that list.
Yes.
Just get his last budget address. When we think about the infrastructure funding coming from the federal government, you know, a lot of the stakeholders have been so effective at securing this disproportionate amount of federal dollars for a region are going to be transitioning out of their roles. Is there anything we need to do now to set up a structure that can kind of take us through this transition so that we can, without missing a beat, continue to secure these dollars, which are going to be, you know, starting to flow soon?
Well, I think when we go together with one plan or one wish list that's supported by the business community, by elected officials, by our universities, foundations, labor, again, Jen mentioned this earlier, when we all come together, we have a much more powerful voice, regardless of who's there, whether it's, you know, we've had some really, you know, big hitters, I'll call them, Mike Doyle, Jack Murtha, Bud Schuster, Bill Schuster. You know, we've had some really influential people in various committees in Washington that have been able to bring, you know, maybe significant dollars that other regions haven't been able to get. So we're going to lose that. That's going to go away. And you're right, Governor Wolf's going away. It could be a new governor. So there's going to be lots of changes. We just need to figure out continuing to work as this transition goes along to have that strategy. But we've got all of these strengths, very diverse and strong industries, robotics and finance and eds and meds, all these really, I mean, they're strong. We can compete with anybody in all of these industries, advanced manufacturing. This is going to be just how do we maximize and capitalize those resources? Natural gas. I mean, it's just, there's so much. That autonomous vehicle, I mean, we just kind of lightly touched on that, but you think about, Argo AI, that was just kind of a, the kid that went to CMU, went through the engineering program, decided to stay here and develop this program. And they've gotten over $1 billion of investment from Ford, over $2.5 billion from Volkswagen. So you think about that immense amount of wealth that's going to flow into this region, and Aurora and Locomotion, all these things that are happening, and what's happening at Hazelwood Green. We're just in such a good place, but we don't want to see that go away. So that's where we are. Stephanie,
Rich.
thanks for having me, by the way. I appreciate it.
So I'm gonna eat what?
Thanks for having me. I
Thank
appreciate you
for
letting me.
being here. Thank you for everything. And that's kind of in the vein of my question. So you pointed out you're also in that group of future private sector workers. And I guess what I want to say to you is what's left for you and how do we help you get there? What's on your bucket list for the rest of your time that we get to work with you?
Well, we want to continue doing the things that we're doing. I think we're on a good path. And I think equity is really, I think this figuring out how to really bring people who've been left behind into the great things that are happening. I think that's really, and I think we talk about that all the time. The training that can go on at places like CCAC, not just all of our universities, which are tremendous, but apprentice programs and workforce development programs. We got a partnership with one of the CTCs out in the western suburbs with Cummins Diesel, and they train these folks, they pay for their, and then they come out making six-figure salaries with being able to have the skills that are happening. I saw where Walmart just this morning has announced they're going to start drivers at almost $100,000 starting their very first year. Being a truck driver, you're going to make $100,000 once you get that CDL license and once you get through there. So there are so many needs out there that need to be filled, and it's so different than what we had years ago. Years ago, we had a lot of people looking for very few jobs. Now we have a lot of jobs working for very few people. It's a different type of problem. I like this problem better than the other problem, by the way. It's a much better one to have, but it still is a challenge that we have to do. We want to get the airport built, and she's doing a great job. I can't say enough about the work that she's doing there. Finish the BRT, get this completed, so we get that high link transportation between those two of the largest job creators in regions in the whole state. So those kind of things have to be done, but I would put those at the list of what we're going to do. Doug, 2 for the price of 1. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm only asking since you asked me to introduce myself, and Doug Voigt, Pittsburgh Quarterly. You mentioned Ukraine, and I remember hearing recently that we had something like the 3rd highest concentration of Ukrainians in the country. So I'm kind of curious what efforts are afoot to try and be a place where they want to come, given our demographic situation. And in that regard, we've written about this for years. We have tens of thousands of vacant and abandoned properties. And I'm wondering how we kind of, maybe we could use some of this, federal money to get those things ready when people can come here, so we can give them a chance and boost our population.
And that's part of what I think we're starting to do. We're working with our friends at the federal government. I know Aaron Dalton from the Department of Human Services done that. We've done that for years with the Bhutanese population and Nepalese population. We'll continue to do that. You remind me of something, though, that I neglected to say. Mayor Gainey and I are going to be making an announcement later next week where we're going to have collection for folks for Ukraine, and we're going to be reaching out. And I talked to Stephanie about this before, and our friends in labor and some of our universities. So for any of your organizations that can help donate, the type of materials, medical supplies, and different things that clothing that they're going to be needing, the mayor and I we'll be announcing that next week. So Melissa, if anybody has, wants to do that, you can certainly see Melissa and get her contact information. We don't have the details yet, so that's why I don't want to say too much about it, but stay tuned. We want to make that announcement next week. But you're right, we've got all these properties in certain neighborhoods that haven't been developed yet, that could be an opportunity. Yeah, they might not be able to come here and afford that $500,000 house in Lawrenceville, but maybe there's another place in another community that somebody could be helped along the line, that some of that infrastructure money is actually applicable to something like that.
Dan Olmer, Pittsburgh Chamber. I'm actually monitoring questions on Zoom.
Okay.
This one comes from Dana Henry from Indiana County.
Okay.
As you alluded to, downtown Pittsburgh is not the only business district in our region. There's small towns that are struggling. What can we do to enhance and reinvigorate those areas, or what could be economic drivers for communities across the region?
Well, I think, I'll think of Indiana County, play to your strengths. You got to play the strengths that you have, the things that you're good at. And maybe natural gas exploration is a big part of it that can be attractive to manufacturing. The one great thing about Indiana County, they've got two major financial institutions that are headquartered there. First Commonwealth and S&T Bank, who are headquartered right in the town of Indiana, not just in the county of Indiana. And again, building upon an IUP and the things that, universities can really be generators for not just the students that they turn out, but some of the ideas and the innovation that these students bring, and then to keep them in that community. And then anything we can do to improve the connection geographically by transportation to places like Indiana County. And one other thing I would like to see, and I can't talk about everything today, but to regionalize our transit system, to really make them, have them work together in a collaborative way, so that folks from Indiana County and Armstrong County and Westmoreland County that work in Oakland or downtown Pittsburgh or Hazelwood Green or wherever they're working, they can get there more easily rather than making it an hour-and-a-half or 2-hour trip. So those connections that need to go both ways are really, really important. One more.
Haley Platt from the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. You briefly touched on downtown this morning, and first, thank you for being here, for bringing all of us together downtown early on Friday morning. Could you briefly talk about your plan and vision for downtown, and particularly the conversion of office space to housing?
Well, we've actually been working with the PDP, the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, and Jeremy and his team, because that is a concern. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I was very confident that our vacancy rate and the continued movement towards office vacancy was going to be positive. And then March of 2020 hit and things changed. And we, again, as we don't know how that change is going to continue with people coming back to work. I mean, we see some of the big square footage users in downtown Pittsburgh have shrunk their floor split. Maybe they're taking 10 floors in a certain building and now they're taking 6, that type of thing. So how do we make that work? And some of our older buildings that we've been talking about typically can be converted somewhat, not easily, but they can be converted to residential. And one of the things Mayor Gainey has talked about is having downtown being a neighborhood, not just a place for, the cultural amenities and office workers, but where people live, and, having playgrounds and having, things that other neighborhoods like Bloomfield or Brookline or Manchester or any other neighborhood in the city would have. So I think there's a lot of desire, I think, for people to live in the city. I think they're in the downtown city. I think the market is strong on the residential side. So that might be, a way to move. And we've, Lance Chimka has been working on that, and we've committed to helping that along with some of the infrastructure money that we can use. I think the city of Pittsburgh has also talked about partnering, as well as the state. So it could be kind of a multi-aspect, multifaceted way in which we start to convert some of these older buildings into residential use. The GNC building, they made the announcement that that's going to happen. The YWCA building. So there's that movement's already coming about, and we'll be the support of every way we can. And we know one of our big supports is around, obviously, transit, around the Port Authority and how they can maximize the opportunity for people to reside in downtown Pittsburgh. I'll be around for anybody.
I just,
I don't answer Colin's questions.
it's not my question, Rick. Not my question.
I draw the line at Chuck Colin,
I just got a text from David Feingold from Chatham University,
Yes.
President, he's president of the.
He's now the head of the whole organization,
Exactly
Pizza,
right.
yes, yes.
And if I read it really quickly, he would say, thank you to Dr. Bogan for your great partnership navigating the last few years of the pandemic. Another major challenge our region is facing the falling number of high school graduates, projected for coming decades, and implications for our colleges and universities. Any thoughts on what we can do to attract more students to our region? That was from Dr. Fine.
And he's right. That's, again, part of the demographics, so we don't have a lot of 18-year-olds compared to what we did. And that's because of the things that happened so many years ago. So some of our universities, and not just the ones here, but you cross the line into Geneva College and Grove City College and St. Vincent's and Seton Hill, et cetera, are going to be really challenged to draw students. And it's going to be a very competitive situation. One of the things I will say, again, back to Chancellor Gallagher, Pitt's one of those schools that has really continued to have huge application numbers coming in, and the quality of students that they're able to attract over these last 10 to 15 years has really been tremendous. And again, we've got other great universities like Chatham, like Carlo that have come together, but they are going to be challenged to try to draw not just the students that are graduating from our 43 school districts in Allegheny County, but around the country. And they've got some great programs like the sustainability thing at Carlo, and now Duquesne starting a medical school, and some of the things that are happening. But it's going to be a challenge for them. I got a lot of work around it.
Okay, well, please, thank you for your time today. Very
And I'm going to hang
generous.
around for a little bit. If anybody wants to do a
Great.
one-on-one, we'll be around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your great work.